we're ready.
Hi, my name is Dick Scheidler. I'm a bear biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in Fairbanks. And today we're interviewing Jack Lentfer, longtime polar bear biologist for the state, and get his feelings about changes in polar bear management and activities in his long career with Fish and Game and others. And so we can start off with maybe your education, Jack. Where did you go to school? What were your degrees?
Okay, good. Yeah, maybe I'll even start before that. I grew up in Montana.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Got introduced to wild country there. Kind of. My dad was an avid hunter and fisherman, and I followed him around winter and summer. Went to school then at Montana State College, which was just 25 miles from where we lived in Livingston, Montana. And I started out in engineering, but it was after the war, and engineers were sounded like they're going to be hard job pickings. So I switched after a year. I switched over to wildlife management, and that was a wonderful decision. It served me well. Got a BS, and then I went on and got a graduate degree, a master's degree, on the study of mountain goats. And
Where was that?
that was in the Crazy Mountains that were north.
Near Livingston.
Yeah. North and west, north and east of Bozeman, where we lived. And that was sponsored by the Fish and Game Department, and they provided funding for aircraft study, go up and fly around about 3-4 times a year, find out distribution and so forth, how the goats were doing.
What year was that, or what
that
period
was
of time?
Let me think, 1952 to 54.
So that's when aircraft became more like Super Cubs, and small aircraft became available to use them.
My pilot had his own aircraft business, and every time we flew, he had a higher powered, went from 80 horsepower up to about 140 before we were done, I think.
Yeah.
Those little Super Cubs.
Especially bouncing around the mountains. Yeah, and I think a lot of people coming into the field today don't realize that our use of aircraft like that is really fairly recent over a long scale.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically occurred because of what became available with pilots and aircraft after World War II.
Yeah.
So it's revolutionized the field.
It took a skillful flying because these goats were located in steep mountain
Yeah,
slopes
exactly.
and head to valleys and so forth. So
Yeah.
I picked up a lot just riding in the back seat of that Super Cub.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good introduction to learning about having careful pilots, I think,
Right,
too,
yeah.
guys that knew what they were doing, so.
Anyway, with regard to college and so forth, I had a wonderful Don Quimby was my major advisor. And his idea about graduate theses and so forth was to write your thesis so it could be modified for publication. So I had a publication in the Journal of Wildlife Management before I was out job looking. And
Wow, yeah.
Served me well.
Yes, you bet.
Pick up jobs in various locations, and drafted for 2 years in the Army, and then came back and started to work in the wildlife field. And went to work for Montana Fish and Game about a year, I guess, and I had an offer from it was actually the Bureau of Commercial Fisheries in Alaska at the time, before statehood. But they were looking for biologists, and it took me about 5 minutes to think it over, jump in my little Studebaker and drive up the highway. And got to Alaska with all my belongings. Got settled in there. And the branch I was with was the branch of River Basin Studies, and we were interested mainly in effects of water development projects on fish and wildlife. And the first summer we took a boat down the Yukon down the Yukon River to the mouth, stopped at native fish camps along the way, and got an idea of what they had in the way of fish on the racks and so forth. And swamped the boat. We were almost to the mouth of the river. Spent an hour. I was able to come up on top of the boat and overturned, and the 3 people that were with me got carried downstream. We finally passed the fish camp, and I was able to holler and get their attention. And they came out and pulled me off the boat, and I directed them to the 3 other guys who were floating below me there. we got back on land that way, but that could have ended that trip.
Kind of a rough introduction to Alaska, huh?
I'll say, yeah. I had cameras and pistols, whatever, went down the Yukon River.
Oh, yeah.
But, anyway.
Was that part of the Rampart Dam
Yeah,
project
that was
to build up
part-
to
yeah.
the proposed dam? Okay,
Proposed
yeah.
dam. And so we continued to evaluate the effects of development in that area. And it would have flooded the Yukon Flats there.
Right.
Done away with a lot of good wildlife habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of recommended against it, but that's not what killed the project. It would have produced so much power, though so far from where it'd be used.
Right.
It wasn't economically feasible to go ahead and do it. It never got built.
Yeah.
Got made. But anyhow, after statehood, this was 1961, I moved over to the State Fish and Game Department. I was more interested in focusing on...
Which was new.
Brand new,
yeah.
I was more interested in focusing on mammals and on messing around with fish and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, river basin studies, you could kind of look and see where they might or might not build a dam. And there's no need for quite as much study as we were doing. They had money for a dam site, and so we tagged along, told
Yeah.
the Fish and Game Effects, knowing full well it'd never be a dam built in the first place. But anyway, I started out working a little bit with both moose and caribou after I was a Fish and Game.
Were you in the Fairbanks office then, or?
No, I was out of the Anchorage.
Anchorage office,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. We worked with Ron Skoog
Mm-hmm.
on caribou. And then they decided to really concentrate on bears, and I jumped on that bear project when it opened up. And we were doing both polar and brown bears.
What do you think prompted the interest in the department in bears, especially like brown bears?
Well, with regard to the polar bears, all the use of aircraft for hunting.
Yeah.
And people are concerned that nobody was really overseeing it and really taking too many bears and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, split the project. I went full-time on polar bears and would go up, work out of Barrow during the field season when the weather was good, late winter and spring, early spring. Did that for 2 or 3 years, and then moved the family to Barrow for a permanent stay. We planned to stay there for 2 years and actually stayed for 3 years. So that was really a nice.
So that must have
nice
been in the
situation.
early 70s.
That was
Because you were still in Barrow in 72.
Yeah, 69 to 72
Yeah,
is
okay.
when I lived there.
Right.
And it still came up afterwards.
Mhm.
Moved back to Anchorage.
Were you primarily focused on harvest when you were looking at that?
A lot
Yeah.
was on harvest. And we'd go into the villages, and we're collecting specimens, so I'd go in and talk to local people, the bears they got, I had a specimen bag for them, and so forth. And I remember getting a greasy package in the mail one time.
Post office must have loved that.
There's a pair of testicles in that.
Not necessarily the sample you were after.
No, it was, reproductive tract is a reproductive.
I get it.
That's the same thing. that was good work. And I was concerned about the hunting with use of aircraft. So I got together with the best bear hunter, Benny and Wowok, in the village of Wainwright. And he and I made some wonderful trips up and down the coast. And my thought was, would the local people here have the wherewithal to take out a hunter and they could survive and have a good experience?
From the ground.
From the ground,
Right,
yeah, ground-based only.
Yeah, similarly to what's going on now in Canada, northern Canada, with guided hunts. Yeah.
And it was, I had some wonderful time with him. He really knew what to do and how to survive and so forth. And had 2 tents, and we'd sleep in one and cook in another, and trying to keep the food scent concentrated, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we saw Benny knew the coast so well that he'd say, well, we'll go across country here, and then we come to, what is it, Pier Bay or another.
South of Barrow.
Place, yeah, south of Barrow, where the bears concentrate. And sure enough, we'd get down there and we'd see tracks or we'd see bears. So it would have been a wonderful experience. So then.
Well, do you think what was your conclusion from that?
Okay.
Do you think that ground-based hunting would have worked back then?
Oh, yes, I definitely think it would have. But we first had to convince the game board in the state of Alaska to get rid of the airplanes. So,
Because of the competition.
Yeah. So then I even drafted letters from people who wait for people from Wainwright to send to the governor, this type of thing. And I'd gotten acquainted with these polar bears, some of the polar bear airplane guides during this period also. I'd actually been out in the ice with them. And I remember one of them said, what happened to that Lentfer? Did he hit his head when he fell out of a helicopter or something? Couldn't believe that I was taking the position I was. But the airplane hunting was just, the more you saw, but the less acceptable it was. You know, there'd be 2 planes flying together, go out over the ice, both of them searching for bear tracks, communicating by radio. One of them had the hunter from outside or wherever he was from in the plane, and they'd get up on the bear, and the plane with the hunter would land, and the other plane would just haze the bear past the hunter, and he'd shoot the bear. And then the 2 guys, the other plane would land, the 2 guys would skin the bear, and the hunter would even hit his knife buddy back in the airplane, back to Kotzebue, or wherever they're based. They send the hunter home, and then they might pick up a local, say a nurse from the hospital or whatever, and sell her a polar bear hunt until the next client came from California or wherever. And it was just overdone.
Now, just to clarify, was that legal to haze bears with aircraft back then, or were these guys operating a little bit on the outskirts of the law?
Yeah, I don't.
Now it's certainly
legal. I don't
yeah.
remember, but it wouldn't have mattered because they were just,
No enforcement.
They're out over high seas water.
Yeah.
More, more
Sure.
really away from land, and so and they would call the governor's office. It was an industry, so-called industry, of bringing money into the state. And so there was a big struggle there, but the governor and the legislature finally got rid of it and said we're not going to allow it. And then the Marine Mammal Protection Act came along at the same time, and that gave things a different color, you might say.
Sure.
That disallowed all hunting other than by natives. And so there was just no Caucasian hunters to take out.
Right,
So
yeah.
Industry never got started by hunting natives, with the natives as guides. So that was kind of the end of that. And another thing that we had going during this time was we had the first international meeting on polar bears in Fairbanks.
Mm-hmm. You remember what year that was?
Probably about
68?
65.
Oh, early. Oh, yeah.
Fairly early, yeah.
Mhm.
Really early. And we had delegates from the 4 polar bear countries, Canada, Norway. Let's see, the Russians did not send anyone. Oh, Denmark, and of course the U.S. And from that, we formed the Polar Bear Specialist Group.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Under IUCN.
Under IUCN,
Right.
the World Wildlife Fund, and we would meet in Switzerland, Switzerland, which was a neutral country that the Russians would send delegates to during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
This was so politicized at that time.
Sure.
And the first Russians that came, there was one guy high up in the state there, and he made sure the biologists didn't get out of hand. They brought their own vodka and good local food.
Yeah.
We brought scotch and bourbon. But they were good meetings. We met every 2 to 3 years in Moors, Switzerland. That continued for a number of years. And put together some cooperative programs. One person would concentrate on population dynamics, and somebody else on developing a technique for marking bears. And everybody was using the same set of markers.
Yeah. Just like ear tags today,
Ear tags
continues.
today,
Those
yeah,
continue to be
yeah.
international for polar bears.
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, so those were all good days. And,
well, that led to the treaty, though, right?
Yeah.
Which
then we
is
had-
one of the few
yeah,
wildlife treaties that we
Another
have.
thing we got out of it was an international treaty that the 5 nations so finally accepted.
Mhm.
And it was kind of a first of its kind.
That was 73 also.
73.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So that was a big year for polar bears.
Yeah, busy years.
Yeah, yeah. So did you, so you lived in Barrow those three years, and during that time, was that when you started capturing polar bears?
No,
Or were you doing
we
that
started
earlier?
before, yeah. Guy Lee Miller still lives here in Anchorage. He and I went out over the ice.
Mm-hmm.
And we, before that, there'd been some people from a university on the East Coast. I can't remember where it was anymore, or even Von Flieger was the guy's name, one of them. Anyhow, they wanted to get into the polar bear business, so they hired somebody with a Super Cub, and they were trying to mobilize bears.
From a Super Cub?
Yeah. And all they did was have a bear run into the airplane and wreck the airplane and kill the bear.
Yeah,
And-
great, yeah.
Yeah, and so I proposed to go up there and mark bears. I think Jim Brooks was high level in the game department then.
Mhm.
And he said, how many bears are you going to kill? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I had to
Right.
kind of deal with.
Thanks to
when I
that
started
experience,
this,
yeah.
In the first year, we got 31 bears, developed a technique for immobilizing from a helicopter.
Mm-hmm. So that technique actually didn't come from brown bears. It started from the brown bear capture programs.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
that's interesting, yeah. Because Lee Miller was more associated with the brown bears, yeah, you know.
Yeah, he worked
Historic.
Bear Project in general, but
Yeah.
he worked with me on polar bears
Huh.
for a number of years.
What drug did you use?
Sernaline.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
never used.
Yeah,
And, but it was your first bear, you stay with it until it wakes up.
yeah.
And we had a location on them, we'd go out and check on them every day after that,
Mm-hmm.
make sure. it
Now,
was
were you
working
actually
for us.
collaring too, or just
we collared,
taking samples or marking?
We collared some, but not too many at that time. Of course, the males, the necks are so almost as big as a head, and it's hard to keep a collar on.
Right. Same problem today, I mean,
Yeah.
that researchers face.
Yeah.
So,
But we did mark some with radios, and got some, a little bit of data that way, but not too much really.
Well, that was way early in the development of radio
Yeah,
collars too.
yeah,
So, yeah. Because that was late 60s. That was after the Craigheads had started developing
Yeah.
techniques for grizzly bears down in Yellowstone.
Yeah,
So,
and we used some of the craighead, we learned from the craigheads a little bit. We never had them work with us, but we,
Mhm.
but, well, I remember now, they had a permit to, they were working with NASA to do it.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we piggybacked on their permit to do it for polar bears
Oh,
the
okay.
first time. That's right.
Those must have been huge collars if they're like the elk collars that they.
They're big old awkward things.
Yeah.
I didn't feel very good putting them on.
Yeah. They wouldn't pass an IACUC this time of this year.
Another thing we did when we were marking the bears initially, they were still hanging them, was use of airplanes. We'd paint the big black number on there, and
Yeah.
strong ink, that wouldn't wash out.
Oh.
So that saved our bears from getting shot by
Yeah.
an
We
airplane.
should make sure that people understand that now they still mark them after they capture one, so they won't recapture it right away, but the stuff comes off.
Right.
There were a lot of the natives objected to having all that ink stain on so long. But you had a different reason for it.
Well, it's nice to see your bear again too, or immobilize it a week after you marked it in the
Exactly.
first place.
Yeah. So what about, you were also finding dens
Oh, yeah.
while
we
you
did, yeah,
guys
we
were
did,
out flying?
Yeah,
and
we
stuff.
did some of that, had
Yeah.
some interesting times then.
Yeah.
But,
Did you find many on the ice, or were you?
we found more on land, but we did find the first ones on the ice, and wrote those up, described in the literature.
Right. Now, was that Chukchi or Beaufort Sea? Remember?
That was, the initial one was in the Chukchi Sea, I
Mhm.
think, yeah, it was. But later on, we were doing just a den survey over in the Beaufort, basically on land. And I remember, and I wanted to get a better description of dens, really climb into a few and be able to describe them. And of course, the dens oftentimes, there's a long tunnel leading into them, just parallel to the
Right.
ground.
Yeah.
And they form their den in the snow there. And we were kind of watching this one den, and we thought the bears had left.
I think I know what's coming.
Saw the tracks. And so, well, instead of worming through that long tunnel, I'm just going to dig a hole down to it about halfway to the den, which we were able to do. And Chuck Evans was flying me around, and he was holding my heels, and I had my head down there. All of a sudden, a big bunch of hot air that smelled bad came up from that hole. Pull me up, Chuck, pull me up. We jumped in the airplane, let that bear be for a few days.
It's still happened a few times, even in modern times. It's still, some of the researchers are having that.
It was interesting getting into these dens because sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 chambers. And it seemed to me that there's one chamber iced up and inhibited the passage of gas through the snow there while they just dig into some fresh snow and go over.
Yeah. When you were doing those, were you basically doing the whole Beaufort Sea, or were you pretty much looking at one particular area?
I think that work was in connection with oil development that was proposed along the north coast there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Was it the Arctic gas development, or was it actually the oil field? The Arctic gas was doing a lot of work between Prudhoe Bay and over to the east through the Arctic Refuge and in that area. Were initial proposals.
As I remember, we were concerned because there was talk about transporting either oil or gas along the coast.
Right, yeah.
Over to the main pipeline going down the middle of the area there.
Yeah.
And,
So it was marine transport. Was that what you meant, marine transport, or just pipelines?
No,
too?
just a pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah, that's over to the Mackenzie or to the existing?
No, to the existing.
Okay, so that came after oil development kind of started in
Yeah.
the 68 or when it
Right.
first was, I guess, first discovered, so, yeah, interesting. Well, how long have you been a member of the Wildlife Society?
Oh, golly, I don't remember. Way back when, yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever become a certified wildlife biologist?
So I guess I did.
By default, I think.
Yeah, right.
I think they,
Yeah, that's right. I remember that when they were talking about that program.
yeah, they actually, I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
program, and a lot of people were grandfathered in on that.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming you were.
Yeah.
You certainly have the qualifications, I would think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, when the Marine Mammal Protection Act came in, were you still working on polar bears?
Yes, I was. And I was not really in favor of polar bears being included there. They weren't truly a marine mammal, but I wasn't too concerned about that. But I was still in favor of the state maintaining control. I wanted to see this thing get off the ground for the native use.
Mhm. Yeah.
Rather than have polar bears completely protected from hunting by Caucasian hunters,
Yeah.
non-native hunters. At one time, it was some discussion about maybe turning them back to the state, but that never materialized.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there were some legal responsibilities or conflict between federal legal responsibilities
Yeah.
and the state, and also I think a lot of it was funding.
Mhm.
You know, state didn't have the funding really to take that
Right,
program
yeah.
over either.
Yeah, I remember that one part of it too.
But we still managed, the state still managed for a few years after the act, right?
Yeah, I guess it was
I
kind of.
think we were still, because you were still working.
Still working, and some of this, some of the state activities, the feds picked up. I mean, they were still tagging
Right.
tagging skins after bears have been killed and so
Mhm.
forth. to
Doing the
keep track
sealing
of,
and all that programs they still have.
Collecting a tooth for age determination.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then they started a fairly active monitoring program in the, I believe, late 70s.
Right, yeah. But after the Marine Mammal Act was passed, I was appointed to the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Marine Mammal Commission,
Mhm.
and served there for a number of years, and then was off, and then later appointed as a commissioner, one of 3 commissioners around the country.
Mhm.
Served in that capacity for a number of years.
And the Marine Mammal Commission was United States. It's a U.S. program, not like IUCN.
Yeah, that's right, it's a
Right.
U.S. program.
But you were
we-
still part of the Polar Bear Specialist Group
Yeah.
during that period of time, which is the international.
No, I was part of the Polar Bear Specialist Group at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were, one of the things that the Marine Mammal Act people did, Marine Mammal Commission, was evaluate polar bear hunting in Canada, because a lot of U.S. nationals
Mhm.
were taking polar bears in Canada and wanting to bring hides back, skins back, and
Right.
so forth. And so we were able to determine, Canadian biologists had done good work on polar bears, and they
Mhm.
knew they had the number of subpopulations there.
Right.
That were discrete. And we had an idea of which of those populations we should allow import of skins from,
Mhm.
and which ones not. So we were kind of involved more than just U.S.
Yeah, certainly,
animals,
yeah.
but polar bears from outside the country too.
Ultimately, that never happened though, right, until, well, there was a short period of time very recently that it was allowed, but we have never been able to import hides from Canada, right?
Yeah.
Back then even?
I guess that's right, it never.
I don't think, yeah,
Maybe, yeah.
right,
I know there's a lot of debate back and forth at the time about
Yep.
it.
still is.
Still is.
Yeah. And the times haven't changed that much, so, you pretty much had a well, very interesting career, especially back in times when wildlife biology was really kind of in its infancy. Did you ever feel like you wanted another career?
No, never did. I was very happy.
Yeah.
Very happy.
It sounds like
I
it.
consider myself fortunate.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Barrow, well, there were only 2 telephones in the whole town.
Yeah.
And somebody from the headquarters wanted to get hold of me. I wanted to delay it for whatever reason, why it was easy to do.
Yeah, yeah. Now we have cell phones, that's a lot
Yeah,
tougher to
yeah,
do. You just turn your cell phone off, I
But
guess.
it was good for the family, you know. Our 3 kids started school there. And
Mhm.
That was nice.
Yeah.
We had a babysitter for them. I remember one Sunday morning, we were sitting around the breakfast table, and I said, well, let's start talking in the local dialect, local language here.
Mhm.
So I'd say a word, a couple words, and one of the kids would say a word. Finally, my oldest daughter said, Dad, can we start talking in sentences now?
Yeah.
She, picked all that up from schoolmates and from her babysitter.
Right,
So forth.
yeah. So she was ahead of you, kind of.
She was
Yeah,
way ahead of me in
yeah,
that language
yeah.
business.
Yeah, that happens pretty frequently, I think. Well, I'm trying to remember, I think I mentioned this to you before, but you got a bunch of folks together here in Anchorage for a meeting in 1990, 1989, and put a workshop on. And, that was actually sort of oriented towards the potential, or what would happen with industrial development on the North Slope, and then the effect of, mostly at that time, of course, it was oil and gas development that was the issue, but I actually attended that from Fish and Game, and I thought that the interesting thing about that is it led to a lot of the programs, directly to a lot of the programs that are implemented, and everybody agrees, or even the industry certainly even agrees, that those programs are effective in reducing problems with polar bears in the oil field. And it's kind of a model for uses elsewhere too. I mean, we in the state implemented a lot of those things for grizzly bears on the North Slope, and then so that meeting had a lot of major repercussions for how.
It's been so long since
Yeah,
I thought of it, but it's nice.
that's right.
Nice to hear that.
I should have brought, if I'd have known I was going to do this, I'd have brought you a copy of the report.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, that was, and it's sort of my introduction to some of the impacts and what we should do. And I remember you brought Peter Clarkson over from Canada, because Northwest Territories had some active, they called it safety in bear country, excuse me, back then, but a lot of the things that were kind of transferred from there with polar bears and grizzly bears were kind of implemented in with those species here too. They kind of had the jump on us, but yeah, that was, I think, a very, very useful idea to get it together. And that might have been, I can't remember if you were Marine Mammal Commission then, because.
I think I was Marine Mammal Commission then.
I think it was, yeah, because
They
you were
sponsored
still
it.
in Juneau, weren't you,
Yeah.
in the 90s? Were you down you went back to brown bears after polar bears?
Right, yeah. Well, I went back to Juneau as a regional supervisor.
Oh, that's right, okay.
Yeah, so I had the whole
Yeah.
But there's certainly no polar bears in it.
Right, yeah.
Brown bears.
Yeah.
John Shane and some of his stuff.
Sure. Oh, that's right, yeah. So how did you like the supervising part of it?
I like the field work better.
Yeah, I can understand that. But we don't want to scare students looking at this video away from administration by any means, but.
I'll add something else here. Maybe I was appointed to the board of game under two
That's right,
two
yeah.
different governors, Steve Cooper and Tony Knowles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard work.
Yes.
You come to one of these meetings, go through the regulations, and you're holed up here in a hotel, for 2 to 3 weeks at a time.
Right.
Meeting night and day.
Yeah.
But it's certainly worth doing, and I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And, good people to work with, depending on a little bit on the governor and who gets appointed.
Right.
But
I guess we should interject here for people that don't know what the Board of Game is. Because in Alaska, the regulations are actually enacted, most regulations are enacted by the board appointed from the public by the governor. So the Department of Fish and Game implements them, but actually the board makes the decisions on it. So you had whoever was on the board has certainly a lot of input into management of the state.
that's right.
So.
But we had good people on the board. They're good to work with. We didn't always agree on things, but I think for the most part, regulations had pretty well thought out regulations
Mm-hmm.
in place.
Yeah. So were you still on the Marine Mammal Commission at that time as well?
These things all.
Yeah, I'm
blend.
sure,
I can't-
yeah. Well, the Knowles administration would have been late 90s, right?
Mhm.
So, and I think Steve Cooper was mid-80s, somewhere in there,
Yeah,
so.
that
So
sounds-
you were on the Marine Mammal Commission in the late 90s or mid to late 90s, because that's when you had the workshop here.
Okay.
So, and that must have been in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember.
You got a better handle on my doings than I have as far as putting dates on things.
Well, I think the point is that even though you were working for the state, you had international
Oh, yeah.
recognition as somebody that should be involved in a lot of
Right.
these overreaching.
Right.
And you were still on the Polar Bear Specialist Group too then.
You're right,
So,
right, yeah.
and which is at the international IUCN. So,
One other little thing related to bears is this thing that's going on now along use of bait for
yeah.
drawing bears
Mhm.
to a hunting site. I think it's a terrible thing. Take a 55-gallon drum of grease from a bakery out there to bait these bears in. Take your son or daughter out there and introduce them to hunting and doing things in the woods, so forth.
Yeah, there's definitely strong feelings, both sides of that issue.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Have you kept in touch with some of your native, Nupiat contacts? And
Not really. I stayed in touch with Benny until both he and his wife died here a few years ago.
Mhm.
And once in a while I'd be walking around in Costco and hear some, "Hello, Jack."
Yeah, that's right.
One of my native
Where everybody
friends
meets.
right there.
It's either that or the airport where you
Yeah,
meet people
yeah.
from all over the state.
Yeah, airport too. Yeah. But my girl, our babysitter's daughter, Beryl, has stayed in touch with us via Facebook.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
forth,
Yeah.
Yeah. and our oldest daughter is the same age, and they're kind of back and forth.
Mhm.
So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. So you're wired.
Yeah, right.
So when did you retire from Fish and Game?
In 19, let me think, that was 82, I guess. Yeah, about 81 or 82.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I was on with the commission after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of kept your hand in through that and the specialist group. And well, when you were in Barrow, being the only Fish and Game representative up there, in a lot of villages in Alaska, that's kind of an interesting position, because you're not,
It is.
you represent,
Yeah.
even though you're Fish and Game, local people don't make that
That's
differentiation
right.
between
That's right.
you and federal employees
Yeah.
and Fish and Wildlife Protection and
Yeah.
this sort of thing. So, you have any incidents up there where?
Well, I did kind of. There was when I first moved up there, there was a Brower woman was a magistrate up there.
Mhm. Sadie Brown?
Sadie Brower.
Sadie, yeah.
Yeah, right. And she came over and knocked on my door one day and introduced herself, and we came in, we had a visit, and she asked me what, she wanted an understanding of what the difference was between myself as a biologist and a game warden.
Mm-hmm.
And I pointed out, I'm a biologist, and I'm not here to impinge on people to utilize what they've traditionally utilized.
Mm-hmm.
I said the one thing I was concerned about, the regulations now say that cub bears and females with cubs are protected, and I'd like to see that enforced.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's as far as that went. And then lo and behold, a few months later, somebody shot a female, and brought the cub ended up in the village. And so I got an enforcement guy from Fairbanks to come up and take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out okay.
Yeah. You know what happened to the cub?
Yes, I do. We immobilized a bear one day that had a cub and went back to Barrow, and I got the cub out and released it with that bear.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it. We had track of the bear. That was a female, of course.
Yeah.
And so we saw her 2 or 3 weeks later with 2 cubs instead of one. She adopted that cub.
Yeah.
So,
That's got to be the first known case of cub adoption in polar bears.
Yeah.
And, you know, considering all the things we do now to try and do that and all the technology, that's pretty impressive.
But we roughed up we had her cub, and we had our mittens and snow and so forth.
Yeah.
We rubbed her down and rubbed our cub down and tried to make a twin of as best we could.
Yeah.
Two cubs there.
So you think polar bears can count?
I don't know. Whatever. She had 2 people, two cubs nursing her instead of one.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. Yeah. So, so you had to know where her den was, or where she was with her little cub.
Yeah. She was out of the den by that time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it was, of course, it was out of the den when the hunter shot the cubs. So
Sure, yeah.
They'd been out for a little while, but they're
Okay.
still just little
Mhm.
guys, you know.
Yeah.
They only weigh 15 pounds when they come out of the den.
Sure. Back then, as I recall, it was unusual for the the lead to be open all the way around Barrow. I mean, a lot of times it was solid ice.
Oh, yeah, you've gone,
And-
yeah, gone a
and,
long ways. But then the lead would open up come fall, or come spring.
Spring, yeah.
Yeah. and
That's
they'd go
for
out to
spring
boat.
whaling.
Yeah, boats, spring whaling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a pretty, ice conditions were completely different.
Mhm.
It was a pretty safe sort of a thing to do then.
Right.
They know when the ice was changing, and they'd bring their boats in off the ice to
Mhm. And these were skin boats, right?
Yeah,
Booyaks, yeah.
Both skin, but they had, one or two had aluminum boats too, but they were skin boats for the most part.
Yeah. Were they fall whaling, open water whaling then?
Some of them, yeah.
So that was still good,
Yeah,
okay.
But the spring whaling
Would-
was far more prevalent than the fall whaling.
Yeah, that's,
Uh,
I actually don't know if that's changed now with ice conditions or not, but spring whaling's still very,
We,
very important. So.
we were flying out of Barrow with a helicopter. We tried to, fly around these whaling camps in the ice
Mhm.
there, not disturb them, and not try to disturb whales and so forth.
Yeah. Were there, did you fly farther east too, down like to Kaktovik, for example?
We worked out at Border Island a little bit, and
Mhm.
did some survey work down there.
Because the radar site was there.
That's right,
The-
yeah. And all the way to the west, way over to, we flew out as far as the Diomede Islands.
Oh, really? Out of Barrow? Wow.
No, not out of Barrow.
Oh,
We
okay.
stayed at a Dewline site
Oh, okay.
around the coast there.
Yeah. Okay. Point Lay or, well, no, that was too far north, isn't
I'd have
it?
to look at a map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhere on the Seward Peninsula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Could you land at Diomede then?
Oh,
I mean,
no,
there's no airport there.
No,
so-
no. We could just see it in the distance.
Yeah.
We didn't try to fly cold. Well, oh, no, we did land in Little Diomede, sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, we landed on
Yeah.
landed on the ice there.
Yeah, so they had enough shore-fast ice you could,
Yeah.
yeah. Huh.
And we could actually look over with a pair of pair of binoculars, and see our guard posted on Big Diomede.
Well, which is Russian.
Yeah, which is Russian,
Yeah.
daylight come between there.
Yeah.
The Dewline site, we were flying out of there, our Army, the military guy in charge there.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't, okay, go ahead and do your flying, just don't tell me what you've been doing or where you've been flying.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what it took to get the job done back then,
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
do some things that were not always.
We just surmised this little super Cub helicopter not gonna cause an international hit.
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
hope we could get away with it.
Yeah. So, I guess I'm kind of some sort of big picture questions. What do you think now is maybe a major management issue with polar bears?
Well, global warming and lack
Yeah,
of sea ice.
certainly.
Very, very high. Major concern.
Sure.
Unless they get this thing turned around, I think we could be extinct by the end of the century, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Polar bears as we know them.
Yeah.
And people talk about hybridizing with brown bears, but, their breeding season differs, if not.
Yeah.
Doesn't overlap, really.
Well, I'm going to really put you on the hot seat now. If you were a new biologist coming into the wildlife field, what piece of advice would you give someone that's coming in now?
A couple things, I guess, just use, put hard science to work and use your scientific training to evaluate what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But But at the same time, look at things from a management point of view and establish decent ways of hunting, say, and taking care of populations, and you know, and have people develop an appreciation for the resource, I guess.
So would you?
And of course, the basic thing is habitat protection. You have to be aware that that's the basis for any wildlife population to survive.
Do you think people understand the relationship between polar bears and sea ice more now than they did?
Oh, sure, yeah, they sure do.
Yeah.
And Steve Amstrup has done a good job of informing people. I think I heard his talk the other night, and he did a great job.
Mm-hmm. He followed you. Was there anybody between you and Steve working on polar bears?
There was somebody from Minnesota for a short time.
Mitch Taylor.
Yeah,
Maybe that
right,
Mitch Taylor?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And,
So,
yeah, he didn't last too long.
he went to Canada, actually.
Yeah, he went to Canada.
Yeah, so Steve kind of came.
And then Steve Amstrup came on.
And of course, you knew, I'm assuming, Ian Sterling from Canada and on his polar bear, because you guys must have overlapped a bit, Ian and you.
Yeah, no, he did quite well from these international meetings we've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And guy Uspensky from Russia was
Yeah.
Good guy. He and I had something set up. I was going to go over to Wrangell Island and work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we were communicating. Well, we were at a meeting, and planned it all and communicating a little bit off and on. And then I had to go through Washington, D.C. Ron Skoog was back there running interference to get clearance to go to Wrangell Island. And the way the Russians wanted to do it is have you come across Russia and fly in with a Russian person taking you to Wrangell.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to do was just take off from Kotzebue or Point Hope and just fly across. I thought Screw had kind of put that in place. It was going to happen. And all of a sudden we had something come down from the Department of Defense and just stay away. Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to go at all. And I saw Uspensky at a meeting several months later, and he said, "What happened, Jack? Why didn't you show up?" and they didn't inform him that
Sure,
it had been canceled.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that went.
If it's any consolation, that still happens.
Yeah.
When people want to go over there, they've got to go through a lot of times Moscow and stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't just go across the strait or. Too bad. But yeah.
I think we've got it, but
Okay.
well, thanks so much, Jack.
Well,
for
anything else
Yeah.
that you just that you can think of?
We'll do a
I
quick-
tried to hit some high points for you. I mean, with you.
Well, I got one
Oh.
thing. I don't need that. Something that put it in mind. Was I ever frightened or had a whatever? Yeah, I was frightened once. I had chased. Did we go over this already? Chased by a bear.
Well, you crawled into the den and they chased you.
No,
You
no,
did that.
that different. Anyway,
That'd be pretty frightening.
we, a real cold day, and we're in the helicopter in rough ice, and I was trying to get a dart into a bear,
Mhm.
and my gun was in and out of the helicopter, and I finally hit it in the rump, and it took it about 20 minutes. We got it on some smoother ice,
Mhm.
and it lay down, and oh no, it didn't lay down, and I shot it with a real light dosage, and then after about 20 minutes it laid down. It was kind of a typical reaction.
Mhm.
I thought it was completely out, and Lee Miller, my partner, was changing film in a helicopter, and I had a yearling cub with it. And I
Mhm.
jumped out with a dart gun, going to run over and shoot the cub, and I run from the ground.
Mhm.
And I got out about halfway between the bear and the helicopter, and the bear was just up chasing me full bore. I hollered at Lee when he was watching. He was out of the helicopter with a big .338 rifle, and he shot once in front of the bear. The next time he shot, he broke its shoulder and stopped the bear.
Yeah.
About 3 feet behind me. When it landed, when it stopped. Lee came running up and said, "I'm sure sorry I had to shoot that bear, Jack." I said, "I'm sure glad you shot it."
Yeah.
So that was bad, but it was a
You survived. That's-
interesting day.
Yeah, that's a very interesting day.
And we took the bear in the barrow, and the Arctic Research Lab there had facilities for holding animals.
Mhm.
That bear grew up. And,
That was Irish.
no, Irish was another one.
Oh, okay.
Irish was another one.
Ah.
Yeah. But so anyway, scientists would come up and do metabolic type work
Mhm.
and so forth on
Yeah.
these bears. So it's,
Did you have any interactions with Irish?
just watching them parade back and forth.
Yeah.
No.
He never got out and you had to take care of him.
He did get out once.
Well, Pete Savalik.
The Pete Savalik herded him back in the.
Yeah.
Back
I
in the
actually
den.
was up at Gnarl the year, that's when I met you, the year, I think after that happened, and
Yeah.
Pete told that story
Oh, yeah.
about using the shovel.
Yeah.
Every
right,
time
yeah.
the bear's head would swing, he'd put the shovel by it and he just herded him back.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
Only Pete could tell that story like that. Probably only Pete would do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think another time one did get loose and I immobilized it.
Took it back.
Yeah, we got it back
Yeah.
in the den, or the den in the pen.
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much for sitting down with us,
Well,
Jack.
thank you, it's been fun.
It has been fun,
great.
hasn't it? It's
Right,
like just
right.
sitting in the bar telling stories. I love it.
And that's why we do this, because,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a kid from the lower 48, and just hearing about polar bears is amazing. But to sit down and talk with somebody who's been there from the start is fantastic.
Yeah, it's been fun for me too. So, what happens with this now, Andrew?
So what'll happen is I'll edit this a bit